using a trigonometric identity, we're going to find the integral of tanx dx. Tangent x is equal to sine x over cosine x. So u is going to be equal to cosine x, and du, the derivative, negative sine x dx. We use a double negative to create a negative sine x dx as our numerator, divided by cosine x. Therefore, now negative the integral of du divided by u, which is equal to negative ln absolute value of u. In conclusion, the integral of tangent x dx is equal to negative ln the absolute value of cosine x plus c. Basic guidelines for integration. We have a few procedures on how to integrate. You can use a basic list of integration formula. You could use trial and error to find the formula that resembles to the part or all the part of the integrand, or you can use u substitution or a computer software. How to find the integral of secant x dx? Well, the trick is to use secant x plus tan x over secant x plus tan x and multiply it by secant x to discover the formula. Keep in mind that secant x plus tan x over secant x plus tan x is equal to 1. Secant x times secant x is secant squared x. Secant x times tan x is secant x tan x divided by secant x plus tan x. So if we let u be secant x plus tan x, its derivative du will be the derivative of secant, which is secant x tan x, and added to the derivative of tangent, which is secant squared x dx. Now, secant x dx become secant squared x secant x over secant x plus tan x dx. It's really du. The numerator is du and the denominator is u. If we follow the pattern, this should give you ln absolute value of u. Logarithmic integration. So it's ln the absolute value of u plus c. So the integral of secant x dx is equal to ln secant x secant x plus tan x plus c. Here's the list of the integral of the 6 basic trigonometric functions. Students should be aware that some of them might have other forms depending on the trigonometric identity used and also the properties of logarithms. And it's perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal to have different forms of the same answer. We're taking the integral from 0 to pi over 4 of square root of 1 plus 10 squared x dx. Students should recall from pre-calculus, well, sine squared x plus cosine squared x is equal to 1. And if we divide by cosine squared x, we'll have sine squared x over cosine squared x plus cosine squared x over cosine squared x is equal to 1 over cosine squared x. Sine squared x over cosine squared x is tangent squared x. Sine squared x over sine squared x is 1. And 1 over cosine squared x is secant squared x. Replacing 1 plus tangent squared x by secant squared x, we obtain the integral from 0 to pi over 4 of square root of secant squared x, of the square root of something that is already squared. From 0 to pi over 4, we're in the first quadrant. Secant x, which is equal to 1 over cosine. Since cosine is positive, is also positive. Therefore, the square root of secant squared x is equal to secant x. 0 to pi over 4 secant x dx, which is equal to ln, the absolute value of secant x plus 10x going from 0 to pi over 4. Secant to x ln is in the upper boundary first quarter, and secant x is 1 over cosine x, which is positive. Secant is positive. Ln parenthesis secant pi over 4 plus 10 pi over 4 minus ln minus ln secant 0 plus tangent 0. Ln secant pi over 4 is square root of 2. And tangent pi over 4, tangent 45 is 1. Minus ln secant 0 is 1. 1 over 1, which is 1. And tangent 0 is 0. Now, it's going to be ln square root of 2 plus 1. And ln 1 is 0. So, the approximate value using the calculator, ln square root of 2 plus 1, 0.881. We're going to find the average value of tangent x between 0 and pi over 4. Formula for the average value is 1 over b minus a, the integral of from ab of f of x dx. So b is pi over 4 and a is 0, the lower boundary. So it's 1 divided by pi over 4 minus 0. We take the integral from 0 to pi over 4 of tangent x dx. 1 over pi over 4 is equal to 4 over pi. And when we take the integral of tangent x, it's equal to minus ln, the absolute value of cosine x, that goes from 0 to pi over 4. So it's 4 over pi negative ln, the absolute value of cosine pi over 4. Because it's positive, we can get rid of the absolute value, minus negative ln cosine 0. It's equal to 4 over pi times negative ln cosine pi over 4 is square root of 2 over 2. Minus negative will become positive ln, and cosine 0 is 1, ln 1. Now it's going to be 4 over pi times negative ln square root of 2 over 2, since ln 1 is equal to 0. And negative ln square root of 2 over 2 is approximately 0.3466.